Welcome to another edition of CPAC Now America Uncanceled. We have a really important guest on the show tonight, somebody we turn to in moments of crisis around the globe, Gordon Chang, who has been this great and clarion voice on the abuses of China. But now that we see this Biden foreign policy really deteriorating America's credibility abroad everywhere, started really in Cuba when they did nothing, when the brave people finally took to the streets. And now we see this resurge in China just really doing what it wants, where it wants.
Right, it's filling the void, right? China's filling the void where America is not. But let's go to breaking news first. Reuters is reporting on a leaked call between President Biden and Afghan President Ghani. Allegedly, Biden is on the call pressuring the Afghan president to change the perception of the pullout and troop withdrawal. This is part of the call that they were able to get a transcript of. I need not tell you, this is Biden talking to the Afghan president. I need not tell you the perception around the world and in parts of Afghanistan, I believe, is that things are not going well in terms of the fight against the Taliban. And there is a need, whether it is true or not, there is a need to project a different picture. Matt, I find this to be just incomprehensible. The mere fact that he's saying change the perception while the U.S. is saying I'm out of here. What are your thoughts when you listen to what President Biden is saying?
That's an imperfect phone call. Whenever they do these conversations with foreign leaders, of course, the press get read out and there's always a series of leaks and everything else. And I think the idea here is, if I had been Joe Biden, what you want the impression to be is that the American military might stands behind the legitimate ruler of Afghanistan. Right. And what you instead have is a politician in the name of Joe Biden who's pressuring the Afghani president to try to say things that give the impression that things are going well in Afghanistan. Now, mind you, this is a man who fled the country, and the Taliban has taken over everything. Right. And we've abandoned billions of dollars worth of military hardware and our friends behind. There's no way to put a gloss or a sheen on this. And you can see, I believe the phone call took place at the end of last month. You can see in Joe Biden's mind and in the Biden administration's mind, this was always marketing. They intended to leave the people behind. They intended to leave the military might behind. They just didn't expect the American media and the international media to be rough on them in doing it.
I do also want to play a video for you. This was just disturbing images coming out of Afghanistan where the Taliban, they are literally having a military parade with our equipment.
Yeah.
I mean, where is America?
So
it has been horrific in what we're seeing. We've also seen, for example, these coffins where they've draped the U.S. flag, the French flag, the British flag. This is the Taliban being victorious in taking over Afghanistan. Let's remember the Taliban, a terrorist organization, anti-American, that have sheltered terrorists, and now, Matt, we're seeing them mock us.
Well, what's worse than that is they're the ones who knocked down the towers, remember? Al-Qaeda was there as the Taliban as its host, and they knocked down the towers. And the biggest accomplishment of the Bush administration was the idea that type of a humanitarian atrocity wouldn't stand, and we would do something about it. And what's happened under the Biden administration is just this opposite. Instead of standing up for American interests and being aggressive in the face of terrorism, the Biden administration has done completely the opposite, which is, we're not the world's policemen. I guess the Taliban will take over. We'll start having diplomatic relations with them while they still have sanctions. We're pulling out of a war while we start a new war with ISIS-K. There's nothing here that makes any sense. But I think the one thing I want to reiterate, all that hardware, there's no way that was a mistake. There's no way that the generals didn't intend to leave all that hardware behind. Ask yourself, why did they leave behind all those Cessnas? And why did they leave behind all those tanks? And why did they leave behind all the weapons and the ammo? Was it because the Biden administration knew that this new Taliban government was inevitable and they wanted to start off by doing what they did with Iran, fill their pockets with a bunch of cash in hopes that maybe they might have better diplomatic relations? Someone in the Biden administration needs to answer this question, because there's no way you leave billions of dollars behind and it's a mistake. And if you did, and that was a mistake, you're too stupid to be in office.
Yeah. I want to go to a tweet you sent out. The overwhelming takeaway from Biden's latest catastrophe in Afghanistan is that he either won't learn from new realities or those around him can't get him to listen. So there won't be course corrections in the short-lived White House, which is so dangerous. What do you think, Matt? Is it that he doesn't learn from these new realities? It's just the way he's always been? Or is it that his advisors can't get him to listen?
This is one of these moments when you take a step back and you think, okay, how does a president do his job? And you worked for President Trump, and we both worked for President Bush, and probably both of those gentlemen, they were hard to get them to change their mind. They were very, very stubborn. They didn't come to conclusions lightly. They thought it through. But also both Trump and Bush, you could change their mind. And when things on the ground didn't go well or go according to plan, they would change things up. And that's what politicians are supposed to do. Our presidents are supposed to be practical enough to see what's happening on the ground and to make course corrections. All good leaders do it. And what I really fear with Joe Biden is, and I don't know whether, I'm not the doctor here, so I don't know whether that's what's going on with his mind or what, but he will not change his mind.
Right.
Even when it's so obvious that he has destroyed American credibility, he will not change his mind. And he moronically walks up to that microphone and says what a great success this is, and this is the biggest airlift we've ever seen.
Yeah.
That airlift was a success mostly because people like Glenn Beck got involved.
That's right.
And pastors got involved, and they raised millions and millions of dollars. That's why there was a big airlift. It wasn't the success of the U.S. military.
Yeah, it's very mind-boggling for us that we've been involved in politics for so long and watching this decision-making process happen with Joe Biden. And then not only does he call it an extraordinary success, he walks away from the press without answering any questions. He leaves it for the press secretary to answer the questions. This is not what a president is supposed to do. We need more of this, just figuring out what is going on. It's why we think there should be investigations, why you're seeing more Republican leaders stand up and say that Joe Biden should resign. And so we're really putting ourselves, I think, in a very difficult position. I will tell you, though, when I did work for President Trump, I always admired the fact that he was able to sit around with his Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and he would listen. And this is something that you understand because you've spent time with him too. He would ask tough questions. He would listen to each of their points of views. There would be disagreement between the secretaries, but at the end of the day, they were able usually to come to a conclusion and to a decision that really involved every single party around that table. And I think it really did make for President Trump in making effective decisions that benefited Americans and kept us more safe. Right now, I got to tell you, I don't feel too safe living here in America.
And for all those Republicans who did everything they could to elect Joe Biden, shame on you. What you did was really wrong. It was cynical. You didn't like Donald Trump, fine. You don't have to like somebody. But what you did is you violated your principles, and you got Joe Biden elected. And we can all have a conversation about how legitimate that election was, but the fact is you got him elected, and he wasn't ready for the job. He's at a point in his life where he simply can't do this job. It's a full-time job. It's 24/7. It's all the time. And either he doesn't understand what's actually happening in in Afghanistan, or he doesn't, or he does, and he's so rigid in his thinking about what's right and wrong, he can't change according to the fact that his policies are now failing so miserably. And we've heard from a lot of Democrats over the last couple of days. We've heard from a lot of Republicans who were more establishment Republicans and didn't like everything about Donald Trump.
Yeah, they seem to be knocking on our door lately.
And it's unanimous. The viewpoint is unanimous. This is disgraceful. America will be permanently harmed because of these policies. We are in a dire period of time where the president can't operate as president and a vice president who can't operate as either vice president or president, and then the person behind her is Nancy Pelosi, who is clearly ready to live inside her walled house in San Francisco. So this is a really serious time, and we've said it so many times over the course of the last year, pray for America, pray for America's allies, and pray for freedom lovers everywhere, because the bad guys are getting all the wrong indicators.
Yeah, one quick question. Do you think Joe Biden can recover from this politically, or is he done?
I don't think he can recover politically. I think that presidencies actually are aren't as flexible as we think they are. We always have this perception where presidents are up and down and they have bad weeks and bad months and they can come back. And if you look at polls, there's a place where you break, and that happened to George W. Bush. Eventually, his polls were so low he could just really never come back. If you know that Joe Biden's polling is, it's fake polling. Let's face it. He's graded on the curve where Trump was graded the opposite. These are his best polls you could imagine, and they're still terrible.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem Joe Biden has is that the people who were irregular Democratic voters supported Joe Biden because they thought he would bring things back to kind of a normalcy. And what they've seen under the Biden administration is exactly the opposite. As much as the theatrics of Trump gave a lot of people upset tummies and mean tweets and all the rest, the fact is his numbers stayed within a range. And you really kind of always knew what to expect from President Trump.
Yep.
And the problem with Joe Biden is he's simply not listening. And I think his presidency is essentially done. The question is, we got a lot of time on the clock.
Yeah.
What more can they do?
That's right. And that's what we're concerned about. But honey, I'm so glad that you're here. We've missed you.
Yeah.
And we always enjoy your analysis. And
it's nice to be a guest on CPAC Now America.
Yeah, I'm just going to take over the show, so don't worry about it. No, I'm kidding. Anyways, Gordon Chang is next and is joining us after this break.
Welcome back to CPAC Now America Uncanceled. It's our privilege to have someone we bring on when anything is going on around the globe that is alarming and we need quick analysis. Gordon Chang, ACU board member and somebody who's following the widespread implications of what's going on in Afghanistan, including what China is trying to do to exploit this situation. Gordon, thanks for being with us.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Matt and Mercedes. Thank you.
Hey, so give us the lowdown. What is the Chinese communist government up to with this kind of shattering of what's happened in Afghanistan?
Well, Beijing moved very quickly to take advantage of the debacle in Afghanistan. Its first moves were the most important from its perspective, which is propaganda. It first of all said to Taiwan, you can't count on the U.S. When we invade, and they actually talked about when, they said the U.S. would bug out. But there was another propaganda narrative, and this was a broader one. And it was saying to the American people that the United States could not stand up to China. So basically it was saying bow down and be intimidated. But also, of course, China is trying to move into the void in Pakistan, in Afghanistan for a lot of reasons. And part of it is to protect their position in Pakistan, which they feel is endangered by the rise of militancy in Kabul. So it's a complicated picture for Beijing, but they certainly are moving to undermine American interests. And by the way, Matt, let's remember that during the insurgency, China was supplying small arms to the Taliban, and those were used to kill American and NATO troops.
Yeah, no, it's been shocking to watch how quickly a country can crumble, how quickly the terrorist organization, the Taliban, could take control and continue to brutalize the Afghan people. But let me ask you on the China capabilities. One of the things that obviously they're looking at here is the access to about $1 trillion in untapped mineral deposits in Afghanistan. This includes lithium, iron, copper, cobalt. This is truly China looking to invest in Afghanistan. Is that what you're seeing so far?
Oh, sure, because Afghanistan has more lithium than anybody else. And Biden has just made this work because 2 weeks ago, he issued the executive order setting the target that by 2030, half of all American vehicles should be electric powered. That means we're going to need lithium, and that means we're going to need other rare earths. So this is a situation where Biden is even aggravating this. But also, China has had that copper mine not far from Kabul. It's not been able to exploit it, and the question is whether it'd be able to in the future. Obviously, it wants to. And there are some other things that Beijing wants. They want Afghanistan to be a part of their land bridge to the Arabian Sea. This is important for them because they'd like to avoid the Malacca Straits, which is a chokehold, which they know the U.S. Navy can close. So they're trying to eliminate that vulnerability by going direct. And that includes Afghanistan and Iran being part of their land bridge.
Gordon, what else is going on in this neighborhood with the crumbling of the previous government of Afghanistan, which equates to the crumbling of American credibility and the whole concept of there would be this war on terror where if you took on America, we would take you on. I worry what other bullies around the globe are going to do in this kind of morass.
Well, I think they will take advantage of the situation. And this issue of credibility is critical. So, for instance, in India, India was moving very close to the US, moving very much into the American camp. We talked about the Quad, which was the grouping of India, the United States, Japan, and Australia. The Quad now is very much on hold because America's allies in New Delhi have actually been disheartened, and they're no longer promoting the notion of working with the United States. And that means that India will move close to Russia. That's a reprise of the Cold War. And there might even be some accommodation with China, even though China is trying to break apart India. So if we lose the world's most populous democracy, and it very well may be the world's most populous country at this point, that'll be a historic step back for the United States.
I think one of the interesting things that we're seeing with the Biden administration is that they keep talking about their willingness to cooperate with the Taliban, negotiate with the Taliban. As we know, there's still stranded Americans there. Many of our pro-America Afghan people that basically were supporting American military now face the possibility of an execution or being tortured. Seriously, you understand international politics so well. Is there in any way that the U.S. should accept international legitimacy for the Taliban?
Well, absolutely not. And it's a very simple situation. The Taliban was killing Americans, and we should not accept that. We should be going after the Taliban. Unfortunately, we're hearing hints from Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, as well as from Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, that we're going to have some sort of accommodation with the Taliban. We're going to provide aid, and we're going to allow multilateral organizations like the IMF to provide that assistance. And the idea is, I suppose, that they want to help the Taliban so the Taliban will allow Americans and others to leave, because we have Americans still trapped there, as you point out. This is wrong. We should not be paying ransom. We should not allow the Taliban to set the terms for the release of Americans. And this is the fundamental strategic mistake that was made by the Biden administration months ago. And now they find themselves in a position where they do have to accept what the Taliban dictates to Washington.
Gordon, we all follow you on Twitter, and you have this clarion voice about human rights and standing up against communism. I've been kind of delving into some of these historic moments, both in Poland and Cuba, and these other important revolutions and fights and pushback for human rights around the globe. It seems like such a dire point for this concept of human rights around the globe, and America being the buttress for those human rights. Give us some hope. Is this the moment when heroes step up and we can still make a difference?
Well, we do have American heroes stepping up to free Americans and our Afghan allies. And they're having resistance, of course, from the Taliban, but also from the Biden administration. And that's just wrong. I mean, the hope is 2022, 2024, when we have, I believe, a new president, because the American people will not stand for this. And then we can repair the damage. But, you know, Matt, someone yesterday reminded me of the book 1937. 1937 was a year that apparently nothing happened if you were living during that year. But we know that 2 years later, the Third Reich invaded Poland on September 1st. In other words, anniversary that we marked yesterday. So this is the time that we're in. There are so many dangerous trends that are occurring right now. And the Biden administration, and I have to say other Western democracies, are not dealing with the evident dangers that China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, Cuba, and their terrorist allies pose to us.
Yeah, it just seems and it feels as if these communist and dictatorship movements are the ones that are taking hold in so many of these countries. I know you and Matt were in Hong Kong together with your wife Lydia during the initial protest of those brave men and women from Hong Kong. Can you give us an update as to what we're seeing in Hong Kong and the brutality of the Chinese communists in stripping away the freedoms of these wonderful people who just want to live in freedom?
Yeah, Hong Kong is no longer an autonomous region of the People's Republic of China. It has really become a part of that horrible totalitarian system. June 30 last year, China imposed its national security law, and they're now using that for against all dissent, no matter how minor. So, for instance, 2 weeks ago, they went after the writers of a children's book because they felt it had political overtones. They are now going after everyone, despite what the national security law says, which is extremely broad. They're making it even broader in their enforcement of it. Jimmy Lai, who is a real hero, he was the one who gave up a big empire selling clothes to start Apple Daily, which was Hong Kong's biggest newspaper, Hong Kong's biggest pro-democracy paper. Well, Jimmy Lai is now in jail, and they've got 5 other charges that they will bring him to trial on. The 73-year-old probably will spend the rest of his life in jail unless an American president intercedes. And so far, there's been no move to intercede on the part of the Biden administration. So this is a dire situation. People are leaving Hong Kong because they can right now, but this is one of those times where the Western democracies need to stand up, and we haven't done that yet.
Well, Gordon, keep up your advocacy and your voice. Thanks for all you do for America, for freedom, and for the American Conservative Union. Good luck with your power. I know that you're one of these folks in the Northeast, the New York, New Jersey region that got hit hard. So for you and all of your neighbors, you're in our prayers.
Well, thank you so much, Matt and Mercy. I really appreciate that. And we will get our power back, and we will get our country back.
Yes,
I promise.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen. Gordon Chang, thanks for joining us on CPAC Now, America Uncanceled, and we'll be right back after this short break.
First of all, when it started, I think you've seen the leftists always try to indoctrinate students. We know that these teachers' unions have always skewed to the left when they're endorsing mostly Democrat political candidates. They don't like this idea of school choice. Let's remember, when we're talking about school choice and educational freedoms, the ones who benefit are the blacks, the Hispanics, the low-income students, and they don't like that. They want to have ultimate control of the child. And I got to tell you something. One thing, and there's not a lot of positives that have come out of the COVID pandemic, but one thing that it did do is that it did wake up the parents. The parents started to realize, wait a second, what are they doing? What are they teaching my child? You've seen areas, for example, in the state of Virginia, Loudoun County, parents that were never politically involved showing up to the school board meetings, basically getting signatures to recall school board members, and noticing for the first time that local elections matter, that state elections matter. And so it's why you're seeing the fact that instead of these teachers focusing on critical race theory, which is destructive and divides us, they should be focusing on math, on science, on reading, where we've seen a huge learning loss because of COVID, at least 6.8 months of this. And in addition to that, the social and emotional problems that we've seen our children suffer because of the COVID pandemic. That should be the priority of these teachers.
Well, what a great interview you had with the great Larry Kudlow and Katie Pavlich.
Yes.
This whole question of critical race theory, I can't agree with you more strongly about what you're saying about how this is waking up parents and grandparents and people who pay taxes all across the country. What else do we need to know about what's going
Well,
on?
I got to tell you, there's also these organizations like the one that Ian Pryor has put together, Fight for Our Schools, and it's not just happening in one county. It is happening across the country. And what we've seen in states like Texas, where they banned the teaching of critical race theory, that is why it is so important to elect the right leaders at the local level, at the state level, and at the federal level, because the goal is to stop this leftist indoctrination. I just saw on Twitter that there was a teacher that was reportedly fired because his whole goal was to push forward this Marxist ideology and teach it to these kids. That is anti-American. They teach these children to basically hate America. They teach these children to divide us amongst the oppressed and the oppressor. This is not what our country is made of. Our country is made of really wonderful patriots, people who understand the important values of freedom and know that we have to ensure that we protect our republic, protect our democracy here in America, and protect our liberties. And so I think it's been really, for me, inspiring to see parents who weren't even in politics,
Right.
Showing up to these school board meetings, making their views heard, and making sure that we get these leftist school board members out of there. We need the right people in these positions, and it's why I can only encourage you as parents, get involved, talk to your children, and make sure you know what they're teaching your kids so you can stop this leftist indoctrination.
And I'm being told that this is the end of CPAC Now.
For tonight.
America Uncanceled for tonight. What a great show. Great to be back with you. Mercy, thanks for letting me be on your show as a guest. It was really enjoyable. And we're going to be right back at you. It's a critical time for this country. You all know it. We know it. And thanks for tuning in.